Chapter 3. Movies, the Gateway to Books. Just as TV influenced me to become a reader, so did movies, and the first movie-motivating book I read was Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. One of my earliest New PD Elementary School memories was a field trip to the local movie theater to watch Star Trek, the motion picture, when I was in first grade. Now, how the principal rationalized going to the movies as an educational endeavor, I haven't a clue. Perhaps it was teaching first graders science? As I sat in that dark movie theater and stared at the bald, glowing head of one of the main characters, I was confused as heck because, well, Star Trek, the motion picture, just wasn't meant for 6-year-olds. In contrast, Star Wars A New Hope was, or better put, Star Wars A New Hope was meant for all ages, even all the way down to 6-year-olds. While I saw Star Trek about the same time as it was released in the States in 1979, I didn't see Star Wars A New Hope until early 1980. That was over 2 full years after its stateside release at the Naval Base Movie Theater. I didn't see it when it was released back in 1977, maybe because my parents thought we kids were too young, or they were too busy with a new baby, my brother Eric. Either way, Star Wars A New Hope was shown again in theaters on Guam, and Pa, a huge science fiction and action-adventure fan, hauled all of us to the movie theater. When I first saw it at age 8, I tried to read the scrolling words after the opening title, but it was too fast. I jumped at the loud sound of blasters the first time I heard them. I sat transfixed and left my popcorn untouched. I probably leaned over to ask Pa a question of what was going on, and he likely answered, "Shh, just watch and you'll find out." When I found out that a sequel, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, was going to be in theaters the summer of 1980, perhaps that was why the base theater was reshowing A New Hope, to hype up the sequel. I knew that we had to go back to the theater once it arrived. But for some reason, we didn't go to the theater when it arrived in late May. Then it started to rain. And rain. And rain. It wasn't a typhoon, and it was too early for the rainy season, but the rain, stopping and then starting, stopping and then starting again, was enough to make sporadic blackouts in some areas. In spite of that, my family was invited to an early summer party hosted at a house that wasn't military housing. We piled into the station wagon well before the party and set off because it was a bit of a drive to get there. Pa drove steadily inland from the lowland coast with its sandy beaches and easy paved roads to that lush highland plateau of Guam's interior. The more inland we went, the less sandy the soil, as it became old volcanic-like ridges covered with tropical marshy soil. The ridges petered out onto the flatter plateau, which was cracked with ancient canyon-like crevices, so that we drove on a highland road with a black, crumbly rock wall covered with dark green jungle on one side, and a sheer drop of several hundred feet into a dark blue inland lagoon on the other side. There was a reason that the highest speed limit on Guam back then was 45 miles an hour, but mostly everybody did 30. Since I had, and still have, a fear of heights, I looked at the jungle instead of the sheer drop on the side of the road. Nipa palm trees, coconut trees, hardwood ephits, and gigantic banyan trees created different shades of dark green that mingled and shimmered into one another as the light glinted off the drops when the rain paused. A similar type jungle surrounded New PD Elementary School, so I wasn't afraid, although, as I did every time I saw a dark, lonely place in Guam, I wondered if Tautomona were in there. When Mom got nervous, she nagged, "It's 40 here, Pa, it's 40. Yes, my mom usually called my dad Pa. "Feli, nobody goes 40 here." "But nobody does 50 either. Slow down, it's raining." "Feli, I know how to drive. See, I'm slowing down." "There's a bend in the road." "I see it." Pa slowed the station wagon, made the bend, and sped up. "Don't speed." "I'm not go. Will you just let me drive?" We eventually pulled up onto a wide gravel driveway of an expansive one-story house designed to remind one of Spanish villas with its pinkish stucco and tiled roof. There was plenty of room for the various cars already parked and also just arriving. I recognized many of the Filipino guests and even the host, whom I called Auntie and Uncle even though we weren't related, as we got out of the station wagon and rushed into the house even though the rain had stopped. I must admit that I don't remember the host family's name, so let's call the hosts Auntie Tess and Uncle Carl from here onward. As usual, the menfolk went out back with beers and cigarettes to finish grilling and roasting the various meats under the dripping eaves of the back patio. Meanwhile, the older womenfolk bustled in the kitchen as they cooked over steaming pots and oil-popping woks, while the younger women set out hot, large dishes in a huge buffet table. They all spoke in rapid-fire Filipino, and I wished that I could understand them. Since us kids couldn't play outside because of the weather, we played inside in various kids' bedrooms. We jumped up and down on beds, played board games, and of course played Marco Polo. As the oldest sibling, I was in charge of Wendy, who was 6 at the time, and Eric, who was 3, so I couldn't get too crazy with playing. The party went for a long time, which culminated with singing cheesy serenades and dancing. Auntie Tess made sure everybody got party food left over from the buffet table, as she supplied aluminum foil, plastic wrap, and styrofoam plates. My family was one of the very last guests left when the heavy rain started again and the power went out. Ay! I heard the remaining grown-ups say and then speak rapid-fire Filipino as the host family set out flashlights, candles, and matches. Mom thought it best to wait until the rain lessened and the power came back on, as did the remaining guests, so we all settled down in the living room with lit candles as our only light source. At one point, I needed to go to the bathroom, so I grabbed one of the flashlights and made my way to the hall one. "I'm using it," someone said. It sounded like one of the daughters who lived in the house. "Oh, okay. Where's the other bathroom?" "In my mom and dad's room. Down the hall." So I made my way through the unfamiliar house, tried not to get spooked by the shadows on the walls and the shadowy thoughts of Tatamono in my mind, and reached the bathroom in the master bedroom. As quickly as I could without shirking on personal hygiene, I finished peeing, too much juice and water, cleaned up and started my way out. As I passed a vanity table, my light fell on a paperback book. Looking closer, I recognized the figures on the cover. They were Han Solo and Princess Leia. Then I read the title, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. It was the novelization of the book that I wanted to see, but hadn't had a chance yet. Bringing the book back with me to the living room, I gave back the flashlight to Auntie Tess and asked, "Can I read this?" I held up the book so she could see it. "Oh, okay, but wait until the lights come back on. It's too dark to read." I sat down with the book and listened to the rain and the lulling murmur of the adult Filipino voices. After a while, I looked around. I saw Pa with the menfolk, the uncles, and Mom with the womenfolk, the aunties, clustered in separate areas of the living room. My siblings were asleep on the sofa, and the remaining kids, the children of Auntie Tess and Uncle Carl, had gone to bed. Nobody was paying any attention to me. Since I wasn't even sleepy, as I wanted to find out what happened after that big ceremony at the end of Star Wars: A New Hope, I hungered close to a cluster of candles and read as much as I could by flickering candlelight. After a while I heard, "Hey, you'll hurt your eyes. Aren't your eyes tired?" I looked up and saw one of the aunties notice me reading. "No, I'm okay, Auntie." That's when Mom noticed, "Rafael, it's too dark." "It's okay, Mom, I can see." I pointed to the candles with the book. "You can read later." I started the protest, but then the lights came back on. "Okay, time to go home," Pa declared. "It's late." But, "You can borrow that book so you can finish," Uncle Carl said. He smiled. "That's a big book. You can read all that?" "Yes," Mom answered for me. "She likes to read." That was one of the first times Mom acknowledged my book reading habit. Clutching the book to my chest, I said, "Thank you, Uncle." It only took me a couple of days to finish the book, and I returned it to Uncle Carl at the next party. I never did see Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back in the theater. The summer got too busy, what with beach parties, swimming, and Girl Scouts. Also, I started having visits to the eye doctor for nearsightedness, so perhaps the aunties were right. But I knew I didn't miss anything about the movie since I read the movie in book form. So the summer when I was 8 years old was when my habit of linking movies and their book versions began. But only if the story was compelling enough. I didn't seek out another book version of a movie until a few years later when David Lynch's version of Frank Herbert's Dune arrived in theaters in 1984. I saw it, was overwhelmed by the imagery, and wanted to know more about the messed up human relationship that got caught up in weird interplanetary politics. Coincidentally, my dad's brother, Uncle Fred, visited from Seattle, Washington, and he had the movie tie-in book. I borrowed his copy. It read like a long encyclopedia with a sci-fi political thriller woven in. But when Uncle Fred had to leave and I wasn't finished with his book yet, he just gave it to me. When I finished, I decided that Herbert's Dune wasn't my cup of tea, of sci-fi tea. although I still saw the book to be better than Lynch's movie version. I still like watching movies. For instance, when Return of the Jedi was in theaters in 1983, I saw it 3 times. These days, however, I'm choosier with my time and money. I won't seek out book versions unless I want to know more about the story. Movies are easy to draw in the watcher, what with music, actors, scenery, and sound effects. But even a really long movie only takes up an evening's worth of time. If the story was particularly engaging, one in which I would like to live in that story's world for a few more hours or even a few more days, then the ending of that movie always felt premature and abrupt. That's when I look for the book version, to have that moviegoer experience expanded with its additional details, exposition, description, dialogue, and backstory. That was how I read Harry Potter. I was a single woman in my late 20s when J.K. Rowling's first book were published, so I was well outside the publisher's intended reader demographics. However, when Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone hit theaters, I saw it and immediately thought, okay, I need to read the books. At first, I borrowed the books from the library, but compelled to revisit Rowling's world free from due dates, I eventually bought the entire series. Unlike my younger self, I could afford to do so. If the book came first, then the movie version always felt too short. Too much short shrift taken to accommodate a 2-hour or so showtime. That's how I felt when I saw the subsequent movie versions of the Harry Potter books, as well as The Lord of the Rings, which I bought used at the local half-price books and read the summer after I graduated from college. But it was always enlightening to see a dramatic interpretation of what was in my reading head, and Alan Rickman's Severus Snape and Ian McKellen's Gandalf were amazingly close to what I got from the books. Due to this long-held connection of movies with books, I see movies as the gateway to books for any nascent and non-reader. As a mom, I get my grade school son book versions of any movie he obsesses about, like Star Wars or The Avengers, usually short chapter books with lots of illustrations. My kid has a growing library with titles beginning with SpongeBob, Iron Man, and Spider-Man. In this age of new media, where his favorite YouTube videos are age-appropriate Minecraft gameplay, there are even Minecraft children's books available. When I teach a sophomore literature class, I know that my community college students are only in the class to fulfill a core curriculum requirements. So I show at least one movie version of what we're reading so that my students can have a visual and auditory hook into the book. I find the movie version in the library, whether it be Anton Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard or Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis. Then we compare the movie version with its book in class discussions. In the end, I have students remember the book more with that movie in their heads than if the students had faced the book alone. I have no problem when students see movie versions of books. Good movies are awesome. The joy, however, is when they discover that the books that spawned those movies are even more so.